Hi, everybody. Sorry in advance if you hear my cat making old man noises. She's grunting and moving around, trying to get comfy in her little box. Um, it is, to be transparent, 2 a.m. while I'm recording this. And I'm going to post it, I'm going to schedule it to post sometime in the morning. And yeah, I feel like I need to be transparent, which I usually always am on the internet, but that's why I'm making this video. I just wanted to share a little update as to my whereabouts lately and what's been going on, and also to just say, don't worry. I feel like I need to reassure whoever has been anticipating me making more videos. I will. I will. I just haven't had the capacity to do so in the recent past, which is why I haven't been making them. And I love making them. Some days I make like 5 and I need to pace myself so that I don't, overload my YouTube. But long story short, um, basically, I think I shared a little bit. I went away to Benin in Africa. It's a country in Africa. And I was planning on staying there for about 3 weeks. But due to a vaccine injury and the toxic air pollution there, they burn garbage like on around every corner, and especially in the city where the airport is, which is an hour away from the city I was staying in. That city it smells like a nail salon on fire, and I'm not even exaggerating. The heat, the lack of sleep, the energetic intensity, because I'm really sensitive. There's an insane amount of energy that's going on there, and also now Butter is eating, so sorry if you hear her making mouth sounds now. But yeah, that and my already kind of vulnerable state that I was in before I left to go to Benin, all of this kind of added up and caused me to have the worst health flare up that I've had in my life. When I was in Benin, what even happened? I'm already really sensitive to my internal landscape, so I can feel the most subtle shift. And to give you an example of this, I used to describe the feeling of me getting my period as I literally feel like someone inside of my body is taking a bucket of my hormones and pouring them. And just like that, I can feel the shift in the hormones that start to pulse through my body when my body says, okay, time to menstruate. That is one example of countless examples of how ridiculously sensitive I am and attuned to the subtle changes and energies and things like this. And it ties into the work that I do, channeling, reading. I'm very keen on, subtlety. It's my passion, it's my world. And so imagine having toxin overloads to the point where it's affecting your nervous system and you can't be exposed to any sensory stimulation without being triggered and without risking fainting or going numb or, something else happening. I never exactly fainted, but combination of like smells and, trigger foods and not even that there are particular foods that trigger me. Like, it just depends on kind of the internal composition, my inner balance. I feel like I'm jumping all over the place right now, but all this is to say, when I was in Benin, I was all of our bodies, basically, I'll just say this, have a capacity to hold toxins, and we have what's called pathways of elimination. And toxicity is everywhere. We all have dead pathogens and living, microorganisms inside of our bodies, and sometimes environmental factors trigger those living creatures in our bodies to either have a reaction or to get hurt, and it hurts us. And so there's a constant homeostasis, equilibrium process happening in our bodies. And we all have crap inside of us. And sometimes our bodies have the strength and the immunity and the capacity in order to handle those things and to protect us from those things. And other times, for example, when our toxin load is almost spilling over, our bodies are preoccupied with trying to figure out what to do with all these toxins. So it can manifest by, like, our body tries to push these toxins out in many different ways. And one thing that I experience is migraines and eczema. And I'll tell you, when I was on my migraine healing journey, my migraines, as soon as they started to reduce, that's when I developed eczema. And I had never had it before, but the load was just building and building and building. And we also received like shed from mRNA vaccine technology and, you know, dead viruses off of other people. And, you know, if you don't believe in this stuff, I'm not here to convince you. I've had enough experience and struggles with my health and talked to enough different people and shared my symptoms and my experiences and heard the particular feedback that I need to in order to, you know, understand these things that I'm saying. So I'm just putting this out there. You know, and if you resonate with this, then that's also great. And I'm glad that I'm talking to someone who can relate and get it, even though it's a very sucky situation. But anyway, I was in Benin, and a combination of all those stressors caused me to start to feel really off. And like I was saying, I'm attuned to these different subtleties. And so I was just overwhelmed, and the whole thing was making me emotional, and I was feeling faint. I literally had a moment where I accidentally broke someone's sunglasses because I propped the bag up on a chair that I was sitting on. All the chairs were taken. There was nowhere to move anything. I needed to grab a chair to sit on it because I was feeling really weak, and I was feeling really out of it. So I put the bag, and then I was leaning on the back of the chair, and I thought that there was space between my lower back and the bag, so I wasn't, you know, crushing anything. But apparently I ruined this girl's sunglasses, and I felt so bad. And when I found out and she, you know, told me, I felt so bad. And it's my emotional response literally tipped me over the edge. My emotions are, you know, physiological brain chemistry. They're chemicals, and we naturally flush them out through breathing, through crying, through moving. In fact, if you look at the molecular structure of a tear under a microscope, the crystalline structure of a tear cried during a moment of joy will differ from the crystalline structure of a tear cried during a moment of sorrow, which is just a very blatant example of how emotions are chemicals. They are quantifiable, and we're constantly processing and feeling emotions. So imagine I was in such an overloaded state that I felt this emotion, and instantly I felt faint. Instantly I felt this wave of like shakiness, faintness, nausea. It was so disorienting and terrible, and I've never fainted in my life. But I was very close to it then. So I went to Benin for this dance project thing. It was like a cultural collaboration and a voodoo immersion, which was also very intense. So I walked back from the dance, basically sand pit. It was just sand with a tarp to shade from the sun. walk from the dance pit back into the, place that we were all staying just down the street. And I just went to my room and I felt so faint and nauseous and awful, and I could feel the impending something or other. I don't know. And one of the women on the trip checked in on me and she was like, "Are you okay? Do you want to come sit in my room?" And I was like, yeah, I was crying at that point. I was really unwell. So I sat down, and then honestly, I can't even remember exactly what happened after that. But I just remember I started to get my typical neurological symptoms that accompany the way that my body expresses toxin overload. Migraines are a symptom of toxin overload, and a narrow pathway of elimination, because literally I think I forget the exact explanation, but the toxins are like filling up the blood so much that they literally get backed up in the head, and sometimes also like pathogens or something that usually live in the blood. Like I think Lyme is one of these things, and I think I learned that there were like tens of co-bacteria or co-parasites or like co-things with Lyme, and they go into the blood, but then they get absorbed into the organs. And so when there's toxicity in the blood, what happens when we can't process it out is it literally dumps itself into the organs. And so that's why a lot of the time these like mystery illnesses never show up on blood tests, and there's no panels for these microorganisms or whatever, and they're it's not polymorphic, but it's something. There's some word for these little microorganisms that describes how they can literally change form to avoid, like if you take an antibiotic, they can do something where they basically they put themselves inside of a cyst, and they can defend against an antibiotic or etc., whatever. Like I forgot all the other things that they can do, but I've been learning so much from this new holistic practitioner that I'm working with now, receiving hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which I want to recommend to everyone. I was thinking about this earlier. I want to recommend to everyone with any kind of weird health issues that conventional medicine overlooks, and even Eastern medicine doesn't really get to the core of always. But sadly, I learned from this woman that there are actually a lot of hyperbaric oxygen therapy institutions that don't do proper protocol. Like you need to actually assimilate your client to the amount of oxygen they need, and you need to make sure that they get a proper amount, and there are variations in the pressure and the amount and the time that every individual needs, and there's just so much else that I can't even begin to share right now. But I'm learning so much, and this really has been such a key for me. So anyway, when I was in Benin, I started to have this flare up. I was sitting on my friend's bed, and I started getting these neurological symptoms, as I was saying. And for me, that includes aphasia, which is when you can't formulate words, you can't speak. You can speak, you can make noises, but if you're trying to say words, it's like your brain and your speech like it's not there. And it's always come and then gone away for me. And one time I was actually this was years ago, one time I was having a migraine, and I wanted to see how lucid I was when it came to speaking. So I took a video of myself speaking, and I thought that while I was speaking, I thought I sounded normal. But then when I was like back to my baseline, this was when I was like coming up or coming down off a migraine or something. And when I was back to my baseline, I watched that video back, and I heard a couple of verbal typos in there. And I was like, I can't even believe I didn't catch this when I was speaking out loud. So aphasia, numbness and tingling. When I starting in a couple years ago, I was like 17. I started to get neurological symptoms with my migraines when I was 17. This is 10 years. This has been going on for me. And I would basically experience like pins and needles on the surface of like, not it's not pins and needles, but it's like electric sparklers. Like pins and needles, you can still feel the sensation, but it's like the numbness. Like I would touch my flesh and I would have zero sensation at the surface of my skin, like wherever the numbness was. And there would be tingling as well. It would feel like a sparkler, like a little, like the things that you light up on the 4th of July. Similar to pins and needles, but pins and needles is an entirely different kind of sensation because you can actually feel, and pins and needles is kind of painful, but this was just like a light tingling. And yeah, my limbs would go numb. And then my proprioception. Proprioception is my ability to grab my phone, my spatial orientation, to speak with my hands and frame my hand in this video here, like to dial some buttons and hold the phone to my head. But if my proprioception was off, I would struggle to like perceive the depth to hold the phone and where to put my fingers, I would have wonky proprioception. So my coordination would be not 100%. And there's no way to describe this other than imagine the feel. If some of you who are watching this are more have had more subtle, energetic, spiritual experiences, you might know the feeling of like if you're laying in bed at night and you feel your body start to spiral and spin up and out like you're having an out of body experience. Imagine that happening, but with one of your limbs. And maybe this has even happened to you just ordinarily, because I'm not the only one who experiences this, but it's basically, imagine your arm leaving your arm, or like your arms kind of cross over. They feel like they're crossing over. That would happen to me so often, and randomly. And when I was a kid, that would happen a bit, and I was like, oh, this is an exciting spiritual thing. But then, the older I got, the more it became obvious that it was just, this is more medical and than anything else. So proprioception, aphasia, numbness and tingling, my vision. I would get auras, migraine auras. And actually when I got home from Africa and I took cough medicine for a minute because I got some secondhand flu thing. I had it for like 3 days from my mom. And the medicine caused me to, when I walked around the house, literally my entire peripheral vision was leaving trails of light. It's very subtle, but it was happening. Okay, so vision gets affected. The eyes are direct extensions to the nervous system. So it's just another manifestation of this nervous system overload, complete overload. So yeah, and I remember I was just laying in the bed and I had fainted, but I was lucid. My proprioception was the most altered that it had ever been. I needed my friend and then this other woman who was in the room. There was like 3 or 4 people in the room, I think. But I asked them if they could hold on to my body so I could feel my physical body in space, because otherwise all my parts were jumbled and I felt as if I didn't exist. There was no physical body to orient my place in physical 3-dimensional space with. So I needed them to touch me so I could at least feel my connection to the physical world. And I could still hear, but I couldn't speak really because I was dealing with the aphasia. And the numbness and tingling was the most intense it had ever been in my life because I felt it on my tongue and it traveled around the edge of my tongue and then I felt it on my nose right here, and it crawled across my nose. And yeah, so after that, I remember it kind of passed. I don't know how long it lasted, half an hour maybe. And I was so weak. I needed help sitting upright. I needed help walking. I needed help doing everything for a while, for like a day or two. And I needed help walking to the toilet because I had to pee. And this might be TMI, but I usually like takes my bladder a second to relax and pee. But when I sat down, it just came out. And I the reason I say this is, I mention it, is because it's just a testament to the state my body was in. I was so weak, and for some reason I was holding a glass of water while I was like on the toilet because I had been drinking water, and it just slipped out of my hands and I shattered a glass all over the floor. So my friend came in and swept it up and was like, don't move. And yeah, and then a couple hours later, I got this terrible stuff. I think it was food poisoning. I had diarrhea. It was awful. It was like every 10 to 20 minutes for a day, for like 24 hours. I was just going to the toilet. I was in so much pain. I was so exhausted. And I remember when I had that episode, I was scared. I was so scared to be by myself because I couldn't do anything by myself. Like I said, I was that weak and I was that vulnerable that I needed someone to be with me all the time. And I was surrounded by literal angels, literal God-sent angels, and people all talked amongst themselves, and they basically like created their own shifts where they were sitting. Some of them would just pull up a chair outside my door and sit by me while I slept, or while I got whatever I could, whatever sleep I could, because I wasn't really sleeping much at all. And they would bring me food when I started to be able to eat, and water, and they would bring me their herbs and their medicines and bread. They'd walk down in 90-degree heat in a foreign country. These white European ladies would, well, this one woman, actually the woman whose sunglasses I broke, she walked to the little street corner stand, and bought me bread a couple of times. And they would bring me back cases of water because we had to buy our water there, and we would drink these 1.5 bottles, cases of 6 bottles, and they would bring me all this stuff, and they'd bring me their medicine, and they would give me hugs. And one girl, she reminded me of my grandmother because she was so compassionate and nurturing and sweet, like the sweetest kind of person you can imagine when you imagine a sweet person. The tone, the gaze, like the softness of this person. And she would massage my head, and massage was one of the only things that helped with my pain. Touch is a massive help for me when it comes to managing pain, both emotional and physical. But she really came through. And the person who worked at the hotel, like, when I was able to eat, she would just make me rice, and she would bring me rice because at one point rice was the only thing I could eat. And so that went on. And when I started to be able to get up and walk on my own and everything, I started locking my door. So my door, I would keep it open and people would kind of come and go and whatnot. And I didn't have enough energy for privacy. But when I started to have enough energy for privacy, I would shut the door, and then no one, people wouldn't come as much. I mean, they would kind of knock and then open the door and just check on me. But then I started to lock it because I had enough energy to have privacy, like I said, like I would be sitting up. I would have energy to think again, and I like having privacy to think my own thoughts sometimes, which is something that probably a lot of us take for granted. It takes energy to think a thought. It takes energy to contemplate. But, when you're dying, you can't do that. And I genuinely felt like I was dying, and I may as well have been dying because my body had no capacity. And I've been there a few times, but never that severe. But I was in the right place for it. So anyway, as I started to get my strength back, I had already been feeling really restricted with the food there, and because we're eating hot food in the heat. There's no temperature control, there's no ice, there's no cold water or anything. I mean, there was a refrigerator that I could put my water in if I wanted to, but when I really needed it, I had no energy to ask for more. I had no energy to go and even just interact socially for a second, because all stimulation was too much for me. I physically couldn't handle it. So remember this next time you feel like you're having a panic attack, next time you feel anxious, next time you feel scared, you are not fucking crazy. You are not crazy. You are feeling how you're feeling for a reason. And I'm sorry if nobody has ever been able to validate your issues, your emotions, your reactions to the world. And if you're somebody who gets really emotional or really sensitive about certain things, I swear to you, it is for a reason. So continue to track that, continue to listen to it, continue to follow your intuition and seek out people who know how to, first of all, respect you, who you are. They understand you, they see you, they hear you, they feel you. And second of all, have the tools to help you identify the different layers of kind of what's going on for you. Because for me, I wasn't about to gaslight myself into thinking that it was okay for me to go and ask for something that I didn't want, because there's such a thing as social expectations, social pressures, and normally, I should say, at a balanced equilibrium, healthy baseline, with a healthy brain, it's safe to have a social interaction where you are opening yourself up and making yourself vulnerable in any way whatsoever. But when you're in a situation that I was in, literally the act of asking for help and making myself even remotely uncomfortable was not physically accessible for me. This was not an emotional issue. This was not a mental health thing. This was a physical thing. And again, to reiterate what I just said, I'm going to remind you that what triggered this whole waterfall of the worst health flare-up I ever had was feeling bad that I broke someone's sunglasses. Because as soon as I felt that bad feeling, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Bro, you know how many times in my life I felt ashamed or felt bad for doing something that I didn't mean to? I make a mistake and I move on and I grow and it's nothing and it has no... Well, this situation was different because my toxin load was so unbearable that feeling emotion was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because again, emotions are physiological, quantifiable. You can see them under a microscope. You can measure them. You can emulate the shape of them. You can identify them. Emotions, they're tangible. They're not always straightforward or easy, and there is a lot of stupid stigma around that. And this experience proves that they're not always straightforward. Just because you see a certain thing, just because you're experiencing a certain emotion, just because you're having a certain experience, does not mean anything per se, because there's so much that plays into the way that we experience reality and we process stimuli and we experience emotion and things like this. But anyway, I was not willing to. I had to protect myself, and so I had been contemplating this for a couple days, like whether I should stay or go, and I was heartbroken. I was crying about this decision before my flare up, because before my flare up, I felt this building of weakness and vulnerability and combination of more than I could handle, but I was aware of on a deeper level below the surface there was a lot that was just off balance for me. So yeah, I was physically terrified of being vulnerable because I felt like I almost died. And I did leave my body. Like, I lost consciousness. It was not the same, and it was the most intense experience that I have ever had with my health. So I then, I think it was after my health flare up when I started to have some consciousness again. I don't remember when it was, but this was 3 days before I actually left the country. And I got sick, I think, on the 8th. Yeah, and I left, I think, on the 11th or 12th or something. So I asked God, I said, God, I don't know what to do. I'm weak. I can't do this. But I'm devastated to leave. So if you want me to leave, send me a butterfly, send me an insect flying right across my face. And instantly, without even a pause, this black fly flew right in front of my eyes. And I cried and I said, okay, if you really mean it, do it again. And then it did again. And then I asked a third time and it happened again. And I was spacing my asks out. And the fly wasn't flying in front of my eyes otherwise. It wasn't even flying around. There's not like a lot of bugs flying around that I noticed. Maybe for some people, maybe if someone who was on the trip with me is watching this, maybe you're like, there was a lot of bugs everywhere. But no, for me in that moment, that was unique. That was notable. And a couple days later, to confirm that, I said, okay, God, if you still really want me to go back, because I wasn't sure. I was not sure, and I needed that confirmation in order to get me to do what the right thing to do was by God. I couldn't rely on my own judgment because I wanted to be there. And I was heartbroken and confused as to what to do. So anyway, I asked, make a bug land on my left foot, and one did. I had a fly land on my foot. It was like a fly or an ant or something that, like, I think it was a fly. It flew on my left foot, landed on my left foot, and that was that. And I have been practicing my relationship with my intuition for many years. I mean, my whole life, honestly. And I will say that instance was the first and only time in my entire life where I got such immediate confirmation. And I knew that was because this was such a serious event for me. And so I said, okay, as soon as I'm well enough to handle a phone, I'm going to change my flight and go. And so I did that. And on the ride to the airport, I had another flare up in the car because the sky was gray with toxic smoke, and it literally smelled like burning chemicals. Like, the way I describe it is, it smelled like a nail salon on fire. This was the most unearthly, rancid, burning chemical smell that I had smelt in my life. And I think what made it so jarring and so shocking was how deeply it affected my nervous system. So I had to, breathe underneath my shirt like that the whole ride. And I remember I was texting my mom in caps lock, like, fucking pray for me right now, because I am afraid that I'm going to pass out and die. I kid you not. I'm not even joking, because I started to tingle again. My limbs started to go numb, and I started feeling my vision. There's no way to explain this. It's a nervous system thing. Like, what even happened? My vision changed. It was my proprioception, I think, because when I'm here, I'm taking in my bedroom. I'm sitting in my bedroom right now, and I can see I'm building this like miniature, like, bookshelf. It's like they're like these little dioramas, and you stick them in between your books, and they're like these tiny universes, and it's like a really, really, really detailed kit, and you have all these parts that you pop out, and they're all labeled, and you glue them together, and you create a little universe. So I have this all spread out over my floor. I've got my lamp. I've got my vanity drawer dresser thing. I got my book, my bag, my cup, my phone, my cat, my scrunchie. It's like I can see all these things, and I can sense the distance between myself and these things. I'm spatially coherent. I'm spatially coherent. And my vision is working in such a way that is allowing me to experience spatial coherence, okay? That is something that we all take for granted, but not when you're like me and you're going through waves of issues and experiences where all that stuff just goes out the window, and all of a sudden your reality is completely melted and you're super discombobulated. So when I was in the car, my spatial coherence, like my vision and my proprioception just create, it's almost like, imagine having a painting that's drying and then pouring water all over it. All the lines start to just melt, and everything just becomes this muddy image, and all the colors are there, but they're all like indistinguishable from one another because they melt into a puddle. And that's kind of what happens to my reality when I have a bad flare-up, or that's what has happened in the past when I've had a bad flare-up. And when I was in the car breathing in this burning toxic chemical fume air, I had that again, and I was terrified. I was terrified as well because I had a 27-hour, 24-hour travel itinerary ahead of me, and thank God I traveled okay. Thank God. That was the worst that I had been. It was the worst it was. So the toxins in the air were really threatening to just rip the rug from underneath my feet, but I had that wave, and then it went away. And my mom told me that she asked her Uber driver, she was in an Uber at the same time that I was in a taxi cab, and she asked him to pray for me, and he was praying for me as well. And I was like, oh my God, like, I was so grateful, and I felt so blessed that I was like, I wanted to cry. And grateful because I could genuinely feel the relief that prayer brings me. And in fact, fast forward, being here now, she's eating again, so sorry if you hear her mouth noises. I think they're very cute. But yeah, so I have been back in Florida recovering from this, and doing the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and just really taking it easy. And I more so after the first session, but pretty much since I've been home, I've not been able, it's not been safe for me to handle any stimulation. So I haven't been talking to anyone, no social life, which, it's been peaceful because I've been making my little things. I've been reading my books. I've been spending a lot of time with my cat. And when I have energy, I would go like on a walk around my neighborhood. And sometimes I couldn't even handle that without having some waves of weird proprioception, wonkiness, or whatever other symptoms. But anyway, so yeah, I had, made a social media post, like basically asking for help, like for people to send like soup to my house, or, just like pray for me, hold me in their hearts and blessings. And so many people said like they were praying for me and everything. And I just, some people, you can really feel their intentions and you can really feel their prayers when they're connected and they're legitimately holding this intention, this feeling, this emotional state of support and love and good health, and people's hearts, people's feelings. They act as they are prayers. They create reality. And you can feel when you're in the presence of someone who genuinely loves you and cares for you. And the same thing applies over a distance. When someone sends you good energy, or when what is it? Is it? Oh, I think it's a peace sign that makes the balloons. Let's try again. Yeah, it's the peace sign that does the balloons. And then there's like so many other things. And what is it? There's fireworks is another one. I don't know what it is, but fireworks is another one. It's funny. Anyway, I've learned these things making videos on my laptop. Yeah, so I would feel these like random waves. I say random because it's not random. It's quantum entanglement, baby. These waves of like deep peace and deep, like, as if someone who adores me is wrapping me up in an embrace and a hug. So yeah, and I swear I thought I just saw the corner of this cardboard box do a flap, but I'm gonna just ignore that because it spooked me a little bit and it's fine. It could have just been my eye doing a flicker. Anyway, so yeah, I basically made it home safe, couldn't handle any stimulation, because the tiniest stressor, the tiniest trigger could have sent me into an overload. Also, when I got home, my sense of smell, yeah, my eyes are doing weird things. It could be energy and spirits and things like this, because I've always experienced this where when I am especially alone in my room at such an ungodly hour, it's 2:46 in the morning, and yeah, sometimes when I am like feeling very connected to myself, or introspective or internal or whatever, processy, reflecty, I start to see like energies, orbs, little spirit orbs or whatever, and they just kind of catch in the corner of my eye sometimes. And I know that's another common experience that a lot of people experience. And I think that there's a blend of like neurological imbalance, but also genuine energetic sensitivity. And they could both be true, I don't want to discount one or the other. And here comes my other cat walking through the door like a complete phantom. Maybe it was her energy I was feeling. Maybe it was her awareness that I was picking up on. That is very possible. Yes, honey. Yeah, hi. She wants to eat. I put food out here for Butter so she can have something to eat in my room. And V, who's actually her birth child, she gave birth to, my mom still has her, comes in to eat Butter's like leftovers, and she's not interested anymore, so she's leaving. She like took 5 licks, and she's like, nope, this is not for me. Yeah, but I totally think I was feeling her awareness because something just kind of surprised me. So, and it's like you can feel people's presences. Like, you don't really need to be psychic to realize that it's not hard to feel someone's presence. You know what I mean? It's like if you live with someone, like you're just basically aware of them being somewhere. And different people have different levels of sensitivity to these things. But anyway, this is just my real-time interpretation of this stuff. So yeah, but basically I just want to make this video to share with you an update on where I've been and why I haven't been posting and what's going on. So I have my whole healing thing planned ahead. I am so excited to feel energized enough to be able to do the things that I love again. I want a horseback ride. I want to take figure skating lessons again. I actually was going to go to a park one day, and my aunt called me and she was like, I'm on my way to the fair. And I was like, oh my God, I want to go with you. And so I went with her, and honestly, it was a bad environment, and my baseline wasn't too helped by the crowds and the smells and the smoke from the food vendors and all the stuff. But I had enough energy that day to go spend it on my feet walking around in a park. So I was like, yeah, I want to be with my aunt and petting animals at a fair. That sounds like great. But I had been stable enough to the point where I knew I wasn't vulnerable to having a crazy flare up again. So I knew it was safe for me to go. And, she's on the priority people list because she's obviously my aunt, one of the people who are supporting me through this very, very much. And yeah, so what else? I went with her, and we watched ice skating performance. And when I was a kid, I used to figure skate. I used to take figure skating lessons, and I stopped when I learned how to do a waltz jump, which is just a really simple little hop. And I was 8 at the time, so it was a big deal for me, jumping on the ice. And I love movement, I love dance, and lately I've kind of been feeling like dance in really every kind of scenario I've found is just kind of, my relationship with it has changed. So I don't know, I had the thought recently, after I watched this skating performance, that I just had this thing that clicked, this vision of me skating and feeling like I would be able to express the quality of movement that I have inside of me through skating. And I feel like applying dance and skating together could be really miraculous for me and kind of open something up. Horseback riding, skating, hiking. I can't wait until my body is clear and open enough to be able to walk for more than an hour without hurting. I used to go on mile-long walks and hikes. When I was a kid, I used to walk for 6 hours. I lived in New York City, in Manhattan, for a little bit. And I would walk from 9 or 10 p.m. till 3 in the morning just to burn steam some nights. And I would just make laps. I lived on 73rd Street, and I would go to Times Square and then to 96th and then to Times Square and then 96th, and then I would go back and forth, and I would just I had all this energy, and I love walking. I love traveling on my feet. I love hiking. And I'm 27, and I should be able to do these things, But there came a point where it was even hiking for a couple of miles started to make my knees crazy inflamed. But I know that this is going to help so much. And I had my first hyperbaric oxygen therapy session today, and the woman who does it and who owns the place, she told me that my brain was able to absorb serotonin and dopamine for the first time in God knows how long, on a very deep level. And I could feel it. I could totally feel it. because I felt waves of peace during the session, and I felt physical peace. Like spiritually, I feel my faith is so strong spiritually. And it's been that way for it's been solid for a long time now, and it just gets stronger. Even in the hardest of hard times, like throughout all the shit that I've gone through, it's felt really, really strong, really there for me, which is amazing. And it's taken these beatings to strengthen it for me. And now it feels invincible, and it feels like it's just getting stronger and stronger all the time. But to feel that translated physically, physiologically, that peace, that gentle buzz that's too gentle to even call a buzz. I realized after my session today, I went and I drove and I bought a crepe from my favorite crepe place. It's over half an hour away from my house. I went there on my birthday and I had this amazing crepe and I was craving it. I was like, I'm a little closer today. I'm feeling good enough. I have the energy. I want to drive and treat myself to a crepe for dinner. So I did. And I bought a sweet crepe and a savory crepe, and they're so good, and I have leftovers. But anyway, I went and I got my crepes, and I forget exactly what I was saying. Oh, when I stepped out of my car and I was at this public mall, because the place that I went to was at a mall, it was relatively empty, but there were still people around, and it's a huge, concrete shopping center, which I'm typically allergic to, if you know what I mean. But I was literally taken aback by how physiologically peaceful I felt. I was surprised that I wasn't hurting in this environment, because I usually always would feel emotional or even physical pain when I would go into environments that overstimulated me. But I didn't feel that after my hyperbaric oxygen session. I was blown away. And I was so pleased. I thought, oh my God, I actually feel physically peaceful and calm walking past all these people, and the noise and the temperatures and the smells and the visuals, all of this environmental stimuli was not affecting me. I felt peace. And clearly you can tell by the way that I'm talking that this is, it's not typical for me, or at least I haven't experienced that in ages. And it made me realize how chronically stressed that I had been for months, years prior. And I'm still up at 3 a.m., so I still feel a little bit too wired and imbalanced to kind of sleep. My body just is not wanting to really sleep. So I'm letting myself have this time. I'm completely giving it to myself, and I'm enjoying my time up. And I know it's not going to be this way forever. So I'm just kind of taking advantage of it how I can, making the best of it. And I feel at peace with that. I really do feel a sense of acceptance with the state of my health, the state of my life. And I'm not putting pressure on myself to be perfect, because we can't, and we're not, and there's no way we can live our whole lives within a box to be perfect, to live up to a certain standard all the time. And if it takes weeks or months for me to go back to a maybe more desirable sleep schedule that's aligned with the rest of the world who is awake at certain hours and sleeping at certain hours, 3 a.m. is not the time to get on a phone call with a friend always. I mean, some friends, yeah, 3 a.m. is not the time. 3 a.m. is not necessarily social hour, you know what I mean? That's all I'm saying. So yeah, I'll get back on a sleep schedule that's, more ideal. but I can't do much anyway, so, I'm just enjoying my midnight hours, burning my midnight fuel. So, yeah, I don't know if there's really much else I have to say. Again, I just wanted to make this to update you and share a couple of messages in there that I thought were really important. I hope that if you made it all the way through, that you could get something out of this and feel my love and my care. And one thing else that I'll mention that I'm really excited about that could be like relevant for someone, especially if you're still here, there's this getting to a point where I had literally nothing to give drove this lesson really, really deep into me about reciprocity. Something that is really common for a lot of sensitive people who are very empathetic, very giving, very nurturing by nature, is that we give too much and we don't wait to give to people who are going to reciprocate or who are mutually invested, or we overinvest or overgive or whatever. And I've done that, I want to say, in like all my relationships, like all my close relationships, but being reduced to not being able to do anything, and then seeing how people treat me, seeing how people I thought were at a certain place in my life, seeing how those people treated me, how they regarded me, and then seeing the people who reached out and literally, people I don't even talk to who are like, what's your address? And they literally sent me soup. Like one girl I haven't even spoken to her in years, and she just sent soup and juice straight to my door, and she's like, I have sympathy for that because I almost died from a virus one time. It's like, wow, left and right, people just offering. And somebody else, he's an astrologer, and he offered to give me a free session, a free reading to see what kind of overarching energies are at play that could be influencing this really intense time for me in my life. And I am 27, so that does mean my Saturn return is beginning. So it could be part of it. I'm gonna guess. Maybe I'll let you know what he says as I find out. So yeah, I am in this place where I'm like, you know what? I'm actually gonna lean the fuck into this world, this reality, this universe of pulling my energy back to myself and letting people serve me, letting people show the fuck up to show me that they care about me. And I think after this experience, because it was so desperate, so intense, the most intense health thing I've ever been through, after this, I am never gonna entertain a one-sided relationship ever again. I'm officially done with that. Took me some crazy, crazy circumstances to get to that, but I'm done. And that is no longer my problem, and it feels perfect to say that. So that's it. That's all I have for you. Thank you for being here. Check out the description if you want to work with me. I'm not quite doing readings again yet, but I will be probably in the next couple of days or weeks. So just, get a head start, see what I'm offering in the description. And thanks again for being here. I'll see you next time. Bye.